Hi, I'm Jenny Joyce, and today I'm going to talk to you about managing scanned and digital photos. Way back in the day of hard copy, real physical photos that you could touch, some people were kind enough to write on the back of them to identify them. Sometimes it was a little bit cute, like this one, to May and Jim, with love from Wally, aged 2 years, 10 months, 1926. In this case, I have to know that it came from the collection of May and Jim Watt, and that Wally was their nephew, Wally Brown. Here's another photo with written on the back, May's sister, Pearl Brockbank, 60 cups plus gold medals. And the photo, you can see a lot of her medals and one of the cups. This photo is great. It's got the fact that it's 1991 it was taken in. And it says, my home in Lithgow, 38 Haley Street, where I was born, 9-2-12, Lorna David Nee Brockbank. That is absolutely marvellous. I wish everybody had written on the back of every photograph like that. Here we have another example. These ones are from a photo album, and the labelling is written below the photos. Not bad. We've got Marion, Barbara, Robert and Margaret at Darcy Street, Port Kembla. Doesn't tell us who Marion, Barbara, Robert and Margaret are. I happen to know that Marion and Robert were brother and sister, and Barbara and Margaret were sisters, and that each of those were cousins, but at least there's something there. And just as an aside, before we go on about digital photos, I just want to caution you a little bit about labelling physical photos. Pressing too hard when you write can indent the photo. Ink can react with paper or bleed through the photos. So if it's an uncoated photo, like an old paper one or cardboard one, you write with a soft pencil, 2B or 3B. Don't keep going for a 5B or a 6B. It doesn't make it better. In fact, it's worse because they're so soft that they can smudge off and get all over the front of other photos. If it's a coated paper, use a specialist pen. Don't use a Sharpie or other felt tip pen. Here's an example of one of the specialist photo labelling pens. You can get them from lots of places. Anyway, going back to our digital photos. Now, this all applies to whether they are photos that you have scanned, or you've taken a photo of a photo, or if they were born digital, if you like. We also would need to try and find a way to label those, because without a meaningful file name, the photo's as good as lost. After scanning this picture, it ended up with the file name scan0456.jpg. Does that give me any idea whatsoever of what's in it? No, not at all. Much better name is Jenny Gibbons' First Day Preschool 1966.jpg. As an aside, that's me. That was my maiden name. Now, what are good labels for file names? They should identify the subject if possible. Or you may choose to use the same label that was written below the picture in the photo album. But for heaven's sakes, don't just label them mum or grandma. Whose mum? Which grandma? So in this case, a file name of mum and dad's wedding.jpg would not be a good choice. Here we have a few examples. I've got one that's called Bill Spiller. I've got another where I've got the surname first, Brockbank, William Lake Heights Estate, because I was experimenting with trying to keep them all alphabetical by family group. We have another one, 95 Coonabarra Road. Could be argued that I should add in Wahroonga, New South Wales onto that. But at least if you compare that to my family tree, you'll find that that's the house that I lived in when I was little. And we also have Gibbons Jenny at Mittagong, 1972, on a school excursion. So there's quite a bit of information in there on those titles. The titles of these files of photos came from the labels that were in the original photo album, and I felt that they were important to preserve those labels. See the girl with the very long hair, the file is called Camp Dressing Room. We have Bill, 4 months, 15 pounds, 4 ounces. Below the camp, Christmas 1919, and Roy's Tent Crowd mod. There are other ways that I can add information to say, for example, that Roy's Tent Crowd was taken during World War I when he was off fighting. But in this case, I've chosen to use the original photo captions as file names. So I mentioned that there are ways to get that information stored with the photo. It's called metadata. Metadata is data about data, or data that describes other kinds of data. Think of it as information about the photo, and it stays with the photo wherever the photo goes. Some metadata is created automatically, some of which you can change, some of which you can't, and some of it can be created manually or has to be created manually. So some of the automatically created metadata: the name of the file or the photo, that's one of the things you can change, the file size, and what's called EXIF data, which is about the device that it's on. Don't worry about this too much at the moment, but just so that you know, the cameras these days record the device it was created on, the date it was created or the photo was taken. Sometimes some devices record the GPS location where it was taken, and they record all sorts of other camera specific things like f-stops, exposure time, focal length, aperture, etc. What is more of interest to us is what you can record for the picture, and you can add in information about the people in the photo, the date it was taken, the occasion, person who took the photo, keywords, notes, copyright information, any other information you think is relevant or descriptive. Now, this is particularly important. If you take a digital photo, the date taken is going to be fine. That's going to be what it represents. But if you scan an old physical photo, it's going to come up with the date that the scan was taken. And it'll be far more meaningful if you can allocate it a date that it really was, the original was taken, or at least approximate that. Now, how can you add metadata? Well, you can use paid programs like Photoshop Elements or Photoshop Lightroom, but frankly, you can do it perfectly fine, perfectly well on Windows or Mac for free, and I believe you can also use GIMP, but I haven't tried that. So here's an example photo. The file name is Francis returned 24 November 1919. The young man that you see sitting in military uniform in the centre of the photograph has just returned from World War I. Either side of him are his parents, and behind him is his youngest sister. So how do we get to this metadata through Windows? Well, here we go. We right-click on on that file in File Explorer, and then you can see right down the bottom of the window that comes up, there is the option Properties. Select Properties. The window that pops up, move to the Details tab, and you'll see that there are a number of fields that can be filled in here. I've highlighted title, subject, tags and comments, but there's other fields as well. You can see that below that in the Origin section, it currently says that the date is the 27th of the 1st, 2007, which was when I originally scanned that photo. I then went in and changed those fields just in there. I click in that little area next to title and I can enter in Frank Hyatt's return from World War I. In subject, I can put in a whole lot more information. It's only showing me a little bit here, but it in fact contains Frank Hyatt with parents and sisters. I've got tags, and tags are important. I'll talk about them in a minute. And I've got comments. You can also see that I've now changed the date to the 24th of November 1919, which is what we saw from the original entry in the caption in the photo album. Now you can see that even though back in the previous slide you only saw a little bit about my comments, here I've managed to put in a whole lot more information William John Francis (brackets Frank Hyatt) on his return from World War I, taken at Highton House, Mansfield, Victoria. We've also got tags here. I said I'd come back to them. In this case, I have put the names of each of the 4 people who are in the photo, but you can use anything you like as a tag. A tag is going to be a term that is you can search on. So these are ways that you can find your pictures later. So do put some relevant things in there. Here's an example where I searched for tags. I searched for the tag Deborah Hyatt, which was one of the ones that I put on that photo. In this case, just in that directory, and it returned me 1 picture. Now you can see that the name Deborah is not anywhere, and Hyatt is not anywhere in the file name, but it's come up with it anyway because I put a tag on it. So that helps me find that picture. Now, when it comes to using a Macintosh, I'm not an expert, so I had to ask a friend who took some of these pictures for me. But yes, you can do the same kind of thing on a Macintosh, either through Photo on newer Macintoshes or iPhoto, which is the older photo editing program, and you can adjust date and time and various other things. And also, I believe that if you select an image and open the information window with Command I, you can add tags and keywords. So when I was scanning the photos, so that before I could change the file names and add the metadata, there were certain things that needed to be thought about. The equipment that I was using, the format of the scan, resolution, and the quality. Now, there are several different types of scanners out on the market. Some are better than others for use with scanning photos. Flatbed scanners are probably the best. They generally come with produce fairly high quality photos and are capable of high resolution. They're dedicated to doing this job, scanning things. And they often come with additional functionality in the software that drives them. As an example, the Epson scanners have an option to correct color or to do color correction. And I had thought that that would just be a gimmick, but when I tried out, it actually does a really good job, particularly on fixing those photos from the 60s and 70s color ones that have gone all orange. Sheet feed scanners I would not recommend for photos. When they pull a document through the scanner, that's all well and good if it's a paper document, but if it's a photo, there's a high likelihood or a high risk that they'll be damaged. They could be scratched, or if they're in poor condition, some of the emulsion could come off, or they could even tear. The FlipPal scanner is no longer available for sale, but a lot of you probably have them around, and they're a wonderful little device. They are basically just a dedicated portable flatbed scanner, so they're perfectly fine to use. They come with 2 resolutions, 300 dpi or 600 dpi, and since they're portable and you can take them places that it's a bit cumbersome to take other bigger scanners attached to a computer, they're a fantastic thing, and they are perfectly fine to use for this job. Now, wand scanners are generally, in my experience, not so high quality. They're more designed for scanning pages of text. You need a lot of practice in order to be able to get it scanning smoothly, to get a good scan of a picture without it getting distorted. And as you're doing that, going over the surface of a photo, you may damage it again. Multifunction units aren't as good quality as a good flatbed scanner. I know that a lot of people probably that's all they have, but I'll show you later why they're perhaps not the best thing to be using. Now, digital picture formats. The most common are JPEG and TIFF. So we'll have an extension of .jpg or .tif or .tiff or even .jpeg. There are other formats as well, bitmap, GIF, PNG, etc. that can contain pictures, but most scanners will scan to JPEG or TIFF. JPEG is lossy, i.e. every time you edit it you will lose some data, but they are small. TIFF, however, is the recommended archival form for saving your pictures. You'll probably find that you want to save your pictures in TIFF and in JPEG. If you're going to send them around to people, the JPEG being smaller is good, but your TIFF will be your archival copy. Now, resolution. The absolute minimum you should scan a picture at is 300 dpi, or dots per inch. But if you can do it at a higher resolution, i.e. more dots per inch, that's better. That's particularly important if you want to blow it up, which you almost certainly will if it was a little photo in the first place. I have a lot of little box brownie pictures that were my father's that are probably only an inch or an inch and a half square. Those we really want to get on a higher resolution before you scan them, because otherwise they're going to become fairly pixelated when you blow them up big enough to be able to see without your glasses. Now, the higher the resolution, the higher the quality of the picture, but also the higher the file size. The good news is, though, gone are the days when we had to worry about all that. You can get a 4 terabyte external drive now for quite low money, and they're coming down in price and up in size all the time. So go for the higher DPI. And the resolution of a picture or of a scan is set when you're doing the actual scan. Now, quality of the scan. Some of these I mentioned all-in-one printers before. Some of the all-in-one printer scanner, faxes, etc. don't do a great job of scanning photos, and it is much better to use a flatbed scanner. Having a look at these figures here, the top entries are all the resolution of some all-in-one units for sale, and the bottom, the Epson Perfection V600, is a dedicated flatbed scanner, and it has you can see much better resolution, therefore better quality picture. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is backups, and we talk about the rule of 3 with backups. Have at least 3 copies of your data. Store the copies on at least 2 different media types, and keep at least one of those copies off-site. If you've gone to all this trouble to manage your pictures, you don't want them to get destroyed if your computer crashes or if your house burns down or something like that. So really, this is important. I know backups are boring, but they really are important. So when we talk about having 3 copies of your data, that means on 3 different forms of physical thing, or maybe not physical thing, if one of those is the cloud. These are some examples where you might back up to. External disk, as I said, they're becoming cheaper and bigger all the time. The cloud, not bad. I'll come to the potential problems with that later. DVDs. Now, they are problematic, or can be problematic. They do fail. I have CDs that I've purchased after 18 months. I couldn't read the data on it, and that wasn't even a photo. You don't want that to be your main source for information. If you're going to use it as one of your forms of backup, then make sure you go for a gold CD or DVD. The reflective layer in them, the gold one, is much better and less subject to corrosion than on those that have a blue reflective layer or a silver reflective layer. Now, SD cards and USB sticks, I know a lot of people are using those as their permanent backup, and that is not good. These are not designed to be long-term storage. They're transport medium or a short-term medium, they can and do fail, and you don't want to lose everything. Likewise, hard disks can fail. They fail less than some of these other devices, but that is why we are saying that you should have them in at least 2 different media. I would also suggest that if you go for hard drives, you have a couple of them with different brands. Every so often there's a particular problem with the firmware for one brand that can be known to cause problems. So bear that in mind too. Now the cloud. The cloud could be a great storage medium, backup medium, but there's a couple of things to consider. One, have you got the bandwidth or the data allowance for uploading everything to the cloud? How long would an upload take? Number 2, are you satisfied that it's secure? Maybe because it's not financial data and it's just your family pictures, you're not worried about the security, and that's okay. But are you certain that the company who is hosting that will be around? You need to have, with any of these sorts of online things, you need to have what is called an exit strategy. If you know that XYZ cloud storage backup company is going bust, you need to have a way to be able to get your data off there. It should never be the only copy of stuff. So the key thing is nothing is infallible. Have your data on multiple devices of different types and have at least one off-site. Also bear in mind, we've had storage media go obsolete. Floppy disks you probably can remember, but you probably don't have any way to read it anymore. But how many of you remember magnetic tapes? I'm old enough and was in the IT industry early enough to remember that when that was all, the backups were done on that every night. Nowadays, I'd be surprised if there are many places that have a magnetic tape drive. So anything you put your data on, you've got to bear in mind that technology could become obsolete. And if it starts losing popularity, as CD and DVDs are now, then you need to think about upgrading the data off that onto a newer, more up-to-date technology. Well, thank you very much. I hope this talk's given you some ideas how to be able to record information about your scanned and digital photos just as you would have done with your old physical photos by writing on the back of them.